back at it with another episode of Whiskey Through Food. Here we go. Very excited about today's episode. All right. Super excited about today's episode. We're going to be talking about one of, I think, the best pairings that I've done in a little while today. Today is all about lipids, all about fats, all about texture. It's as whiskey fans, we're very much so familiar with not only the smells, the taste of whiskey, but also the texture, how things feel when we're consuming them. As at Ardbeg, it's no secret that we don't chill filter any of our whiskeys. Every iteration of Ardbeg is bottled at over 46% alcohol by volume because lipids and those free fatty acids are important to the structure and the texture of a whiskey. Right? Again, it's not only about how things taste, how things smell, but also how they feel and how they make you feel when you're drinking them as well. Thank you for joining on. Looks like we got a few early viewers here. I'm super excited to be able to share our food pairing today. Our food pairing is going to be really, really cool. A very classic Walker's shortbread cookie. If you're familiar with Walker's shortbread cookies, you'll know that there's a lot of butter that goes into these bad boys. So I'm very excited to get to food pair with those today. The other item that we're going to be tasting today is actually the whiskey itself. We've done a little bit of a modification to Ardbeg. Thank God Dr. Bill is not on social media. I'm not sure that he would quite approve of the way that we've treated this whiskey today. We've actually kind of augmented and changed a little bit of the textural sensation that this whiskey is going to have. I actually went ahead and I fat washed this whiskey with a little bit of brown butter. So essentially what we did is hey, Annette, what's going on? Nigel, what's up? So what we did is we took a little bit of this whiskey and we also took some butter. I started to reduce that butter, kind of turn it brown just a little bit, add some of those kind of caramel and caramelization notes to it. And then what I did is I added that directly to some whiskey. And then I left that out for about 3 days, allowing it to start to oxidize. Of course, I had it covered, allowing it to start to oxidize, allowing there to be a kind of a transfer of some of the lipid qualities of the butter into that whiskey. Now what we have is a wee beastie, 5-year-old whiskey that's been infused with some of the fats and some of that oiliness that you generally see from butter. And so it's going to provide added texture to this whiskey. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. I'm super excited to get to dive into this today. And because we're rolling with this thing of butter, I stay dipped in butter. You got to make it look good. You got to make it taste good. We're going to be making a delicious, delicious hot buttered whiskey cocktail. I almost said rum, but it's a hot buttered whiskey because we don't own rum. We make single malt Scotch whiskey, right? So absolutely delicious hot buttered whiskey cocktail. I'm going to be using a little bit of store-bought. Let's get that label out like we've done it before. There we go. We're going to be using a wonderful store-bought hot buttered rum mix, but instead of using rum, we're going to be obviously putting whiskey in our cocktail. Today we're going to be going a little out of order. Generally, I start with a little tasting of the whiskey, and then a little food pairing, and then the cocktail last. Because we need to keep our ingredients hot for our cocktail today, we're actually going to be starting with the whiskey, then the cocktail, then into the food pairing. A little different than our normal whiskey through food setup, but bear with me. We're going to have some fun. We're going to learn a little bit, and we're also going to make some tasty concoctions. So let's dive into it. Let's start with the whiskey first. Ardbeg Wee Beastie. For you Ardbegians and you cocktail fans who have been following these whiskey through food chats, you'll know that this whiskey has made a couple of appearances. This is Ardbeg's main weapon into the foray of cocktail bartending and mixology. Even though I hate that word, I hate that term. But both the nature of the whiskey, how it was constructed, as well as the price point in your markets are going to make this whiskey very, very well placed and positioned to make some fantastic cocktails with it. So 5 years old, as we know, age statemented, 5-year-old whiskey, Ardbeg Wee Beastie. The construction of this whiskey is going to lean heavily on ex-bourbon cask, first and second fill ex-bourbon cask, as per usual at Ardbeg. Again, those generally kind of act as the scaffolding for us to build that raw power. They're not going to kind of pull anything back from the like the phenols that are going to dance around in this bottle. That ex-bourbon cask is going to essentially be able to allow us to get as close to the peat bogs and as close to the peaty goodness as we possibly can. A little bit of the sherry cask, Oloroso sherry cask, which makes up just under 50% of this whiskey, wholly matured in Oloroso sherry cask, is going to actually pull back, add a little bit of a nuttiness, add a little bit of what we call rancio note, that barnyard, that oxidative and almond kind of sensation that you're going to get whenever you dive your nose down into a glass of Wee Beastie. When I stick my nose into this glass in particular, some really interesting things start to happen. Not only do I get that amazing kind of almost green apple skin, almost pear drop aspect that I see in young Ardbegs, but there's this oily, kind of fatty aspect, almost chewy, almost a little decadent as well. It really, really kind of weighs this whole whiskey down. And it's very interesting because I know Wee Beastie as being something that is young and feisty and almost untamed. This butter, this fat washing with the butter, the brown butter that we did, has kind of tamed it, allowed it to sit down, appear a little bit more composed, and not quite as aggressive and young and feisty as we really wanted it to be out of the bottle. So it's an interesting treatment. I wouldn't do it to every Ardbeg. I probably wouldn't do this to most drams of Wee Beastie that I engage with. This was specifically so that I could use it in the context of a food pairing and cocktail as well. What's going on, Olivia? Good to see you. Good to see you. Cheers. Slàinte. So let's dive into a little bit of the whiskey now. We've kind of walked through some of the basics about how it was constructed. Ardbeg Wee Beastie still adheres to that 55 to 65 parts per million in terms of the phenolic range that we're looking for in our malted barley. Ex-bourbon, ex-sherry, components aged wholly and then brought together. And then after 5 years of aging and then a little bit of bottling, it was then fat washed by yours truly. All right, let's go ahead and see what it does. Right off the bat, there's an oiliness to this whiskey that you don't generally see. The phenolics, those things like creosote, like 4-ethyleugenol, glycol as well. All of those phenols are not as active and as abrasive. They are softer, a little bit rounded. It's going to be perfect for our hot buttered rum mix that we're going to make a hot buttered whiskey cocktail with. And then I imagine it's going to be absolutely fantastic with our shortbread rounds from Walker's as well. So we've tamed some of that beastie kind of bite, that youthful ferocity that Ardbeg Wee Beastie generally drinks with. Still, you can absolutely feel the 46% alcohol by volume. Again, Ardbeg non-chill filtered whiskeys, absolutely fantastic for making cocktails with or sipping neat, right? All right, so let's dive down into our absolutely delicious hot buttered rum cocktail. First thing that you are going to need is you're going to need an Ardbeg mug. If you don't have one of these, slide into my DMs. Maybe I'm able to hook you up here. All right, so we're going to need 1.5 ounces or 45 mLs for those of you across the pond. 1.5 ounces there. Next, what we're going to need is a little bit of this hot buttered rum mix. And because I'm a fat kid at heart, I opened it up and I was trying it a little bit earlier. It's absolutely delicious. I think that about 1 teaspoon is probably going to be about enough. And so that's a pretty hefty bar spoon here. And there we go. You know what? This cocktail's for me. I'll use my fingers here. That way I get to lick some of this hot buttered rum mix off. That batter is delicious. Good Lord, that's tasty. And then I went ahead and I had some hot water. See how I've double nested my tins here at home bartending. Years of experience here that you know you don't want to grab these tins just by themselves. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to add about 3 ounces. Hot jigger coming in. And I add 3 ounces, and what that's going to do is allow us to start to break up. Let's move this out of the way here. And now we're going to start to break up this hot buttered rum mix that's down in the bottom of the cocktail glass. What up, Popco? What's going on, Dan? Dan Kroll, National Ambassador for Glenmorangie as well, watching live. All right, so now that we've started to get this hot buttered rum mix broken up, absolutely perfect. We can go ahead and taste the cocktail now. Fantastic. All of those flavors are still just a little bit too condensed, so we're going to add just a skosh more water. I think about another ounce will do it. Perfection. And there we have it. Hot buttered rum with butter washed Ardbeg Wee Beastie. Again, we're really looking to play on some of the fats, some of those lipids. Very much so going to be trying to intrigue not only our olfactory systems and our taste buds, the way that they taste, but also how it's lipidly going to feel moving left to right across our palates. All right. This looks absolutely fantastic. I don't know if you can see down into the glass. No, not really. And I don't want to spill my drink. So you're just going to watch me drink this sucker. Cheers. Slanjava. Happy Monday. Let's see how we did on the food pairing or on the drink pairing. Oh, that's absolutely perfect. And especially moving into Christmas, holiday time of year, that lovely softened kind of peat. We softened everything with a little bit of that fat washing, it seems. So we've kind of softened everything just a little bit. And now we're still getting a little bit of that lipid structure and that texture. It's a very mouth-coating cocktail. The sweetness coming from our delicious hot buttered rum mix. Super easy to make at home as well. Very much so leans on spices like cinnamon, clove, allspice. Things that are actually going to be represented in whiskey anyway. So it's absolutely, for me, a perfect pairing when I think about those flavors and how they're developed. Those are all flavors that are essentially, amplifying things that spend time in American oak. All of those, that softened, almost creme brulee, coconut, toffee, vanilla, clove, all of those traditional, your grandmother's baking spices, or at least my grandmother, who was a great baker. I saw a lot of those flavors represented the first time I dug my nose into an American whiskey. Some of those exact same flavors transition after, after they're done being utilized by American whiskey producers. Those barrels still have extractable flavors, tannins, and most importantly, lignin as well that can be extracted and impart flavor profile and dynamic onto whatever the second occupant is. If that barrel's lucky enough to be able to grace the shores of Isla and come to Ardbeg, there's a chance that after 5 years it may end up in Ardbeg Wee Beastie. Right? Nigel, what's going on? Cheers. Slanjava. All right, that's fantastic. Let's give it another sip here. Nice. Let's see. Looks like we got a comment over here. Nice. All right. Love hot buttered rum. Oh, hot buttered whiskey. Yeah. This is absolutely fantastic. Honestly, I'm a rum fan as well, but there's nothing better than hot buttered whiskey. I think that those flavors just go so well together. Speaking of flavors that go well together, super amazing transition, Cameron. It's like you've done this before. Let's dive into this 3/4 of the way eaten shortbread round package. Yeah, 3/4 of the way eaten. I'm a fat kid at heart. I can't have snacks around and not want to eat them, especially if they're things like shortbread rounds. Shortbread rounds, lots of butter going into the construction of these. Actually, you know what's pretty interesting? Only 180 calories a serving. So for those of you that are counting calories, fantastic. Not a whole lot of calories going into these, and that's manageable for us. But I think that this was a great food pairing, not only to Ardbeg Wee Beastie, but also to our cocktail as well. Again, playing on that theme of butter. Right, today that is the ingredient that we're using for Whiskey Through Food. But then also the way that shortbread rounds feel when you're eating them. There's this kind of crispness, and then they almost seem to dissipate and kind of dissolve across your tongue again in that left to right action, which I think is which is incredibly ubiquitous with flavors that are lipid in nature. They kind of go very much so hand in hand. When I drink a whiskey like Korjevrekken, for example, another one of the Ardbeg whiskeys that we featured on Whiskey Through Food. That whiskey seems more angular and taut and kind of moves linearly, right? And kind of straight front to back. Whiskeys like Wee Beastie, Ugadal, whiskeys like Anno as well that have a little bit of sherry cask or something to kind of slow down and weight down that movement of the whiskey will allow you to see a whiskey that moves more left to right and kind of coats your mouth just a little bit more than a whiskey like Corey of Wrekin, which again, it's a little bit more of a fastball, moves kind of straight up and down in your mouth. All right, here we go. Let's go ahead and try this. Shortbread round. We'll hold it up. Awesome. Shout out Sony. This camera lens does a great job of capturing. Here we go. Let's, you know what we're actually going to do? We're going to go ahead and dump this. We're going to just dunk it right there. The butter really pronounced on the cookies, amplifying the softness of the cocktail. The softness and the texture of the cocktail is very much so held up because of the fat washing, the butter washing that we did with a little bit of brown butter in the Ardbeg Anno. Let's see how these two things go together. I think we created some magic. Mike, what's going on, buddy? Oh, I really enjoy the softness of this whiskey. It's interesting to me because having been involved in choosing Ardbeg Wee Beastie's proof, I've known the structure of this whiskey since before it went into the bottle, and to see it evolve into something like this by doing something as easy as fat washing with brown butter for 2 days is incredible. I think it really speaks to the malleability of single malts. And a lot of the time we don't think of a single malt Scotch whiskey as being something that can be played with, something that can be augmented and changed in small ways for our own use behind the bar. I think that this is a really great representation that we should be using single malt Scotch whiskey in much more creative ways. So this is an absolutely fantastic pairing. Let's go ahead and actually try the butter cookie this time as well. Again, there's that lipid quality from all that butter that's used in the shortbread round. Great job of pairing these two things together through one single ingredient, which is just butter. And then in terms of seasonality, the food pairing or the cocktail pairing works so well as well, because now that we're coming out of spooky season, we're moving into the holiday season where we're really going to want to start to pull for things like cinnamon, clove, allspice, nutmeg, really beautiful flavors like that, spicy, almost barrel spice flavors like that. The hot buttered whiskey cocktail is a really great way to throw a known classic at people, but just have it viewed through a slightly different lens. Let's go ahead and dunk these again. So good. So good. So, looks like we had a question as well. Somebody was curious to my mention of the phenolic compounds, right? So these phenols essentially attach themselves to the outside of malted barley throughout the malting process, specifically the drying process, right? Through the first 16 hours, you have what's called pre-break period, right? Where your malted barley is going to be dried, right? Or have flavor imparted onto it via smoke. That's because peat is going to be the fuel source that's being utilized to dry the malted barley, even though it's a very low temperature in terms of the heat of the fire, because you're actually looking for more smoke to be produced than actual heat. That's why it's important that you use peat that has been dried but still has some moisture to it as well, because you want it to smoke. You don't want it to only create heat. After that first 16 hours, you're moved into what's called post-break, where you switch into a different fuel source, temperature goes up, and the moisture content of the malted barley goes down. From that point right there, after post-break, you're going to lose phenols at every single other point in the whiskey making procedure, right? From shipping the malted barley from Port Ellen malting facility over to Ardbeg. What started out as 55 to 65 parts per million, you'll lose some phenols in transportation there. You'll lose some in grinding down to grist, grit, and husk, which are the components that you need to grind malted barley down into, essentially to get it to be able to mash it and then ferment it, right? You'll lose it in mashing. Again, you'll lose it in fermentation. You'll lose a lot in distillation because phenols are essentially an organic compound. They not all of them will be able to make it through the relatively violent process of distillation, right? Then after that, even in aging, in maturation, you're actually going to lose these phenols as well. So much so that if you look at an Ardbeg 10 year and Ardbeg 19 like Treban, which we just released batch 2 of, if you look at those whiskeys side by side, and even perform like high performance liquid chromatography on them, the genetic makeup of the phenolic compounds will be different, even though they started as the exact same, 55 to 65 parts per million in terms of their phenolic range, right? But what that'll tell us is that after 10, 12, 13 years, phenols will start to drop off. And that's why whiskeys like Treban or the whiskeys from the Ardbeg 20-something series were so softened and such a far departure from the style that we know as Ardbeg. And I think that speaks volumes to Ardbeg's ability to make whiskeys that are clearly Ardbegian, but that at the exact same time show nuance in and of themselves. I think that it's one of the mistakes that we make as bartenders is believing that all peated whiskeys are created the exact same and that we can use them interchangeably when they're really not. There are incredible levels of nuance that we have to be able to pay attention to as well, right? Hi Jessica, what's going on? Good to see you. It's great to have you joining us as well. We're just talking about a little bit of food pairing. We're talking about some whiskey theory as well. We have kind of dove straight in today with a fantastic pairing of Ardbeg Wee Beastie that was washed, or fat washed I should say, and a little bit of brown butter. And then what we did is we made an absolutely fantastic hot buttered whiskey cocktail. I don't generally buy hot buttered rum mix. I usually, traditionally have made it at home. It's awesome. There's a lot of really great recipes out there as well. If you have a dope recipe for hot buttered rum, DM it to me as well, because I would love to see your take on that cocktail as well. The food pairing today is absolutely brilliant. Walker's shortbread rounds. I'm such a fat kid at heart that I just want to eat everything around. There we are. I just want to eat everything around, especially if it's got butter in it. So what we've been doing is we've been talking a little bit about the theory of peated whiskeys and how they're utilized behind the bar, and then also a little bit of food pairing. That's the usual here at Whiskey Through Food. Make it fun, make it interesting, make it fast. Happy Monday. I guess I'm out until Friday. If you tune back in, 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we're going to have another absolutely brilliant and smashing food pairing for you. Again, this happens every Monday, every Friday. I'm Cameron George, a.k.a. Ardbeg Cam. And I'll see you later on this week. Cheers and Slanjava.